I was not happy with the investigation, and I just they didn't put anything into it, and it showed.
So, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Cobain Case 30th Anniversary Series, and especially my guests, Captain Neil Lowe and Tom Grant. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for
You're welcome.
hosting this.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to kick right off, and I have a question for you, Captain Lowe. Um, after 50 years of police work, do you miss it at all? And also, could you tell us about what it means to be a captain of the Seattle Police Department?
Okay. You're gonna have to play Larry King here because I did it already. So 50 years. Yeah, that I still have dreams about it. And I'm in captain-like situations. I think it's common to have a dream where you're back in school or college and you're not prepared for a test and you're not even sure you're in the right room, but all of a sudden there's a test. Well, it's those kind of dreams, but for me, it has like a police scenario of some kind where I was a commander and it was up to me to make sure it went right. And so I often have those, and they're not nightmares, they're more disturbing. But when do I grow out of that? Well, it's 50 years of your life. How are you going to grow out of that? And when is time going to pass? So, and then if I talk about the police department, I talk about we this, we that, we this. I'm not part of the we anymore. And I should point out that technically I'm retired as far as the state is concerned. I get my retirement from the state pension. But when I went to turn in my badge to the deputy chief, the rule is I turn into him, he presents it to the fiscal guy who takes custody of it. So I give it to the chief and he looks at the badge and he looks at me and he says, here, you keep it, you've earned it. So I really haven't surrendered my commission as far as that goes. But the finance guy says, chief, that's city property, he can't keep it. And he turns to the finance guy and says, bill me. Yeah, so he was giving me the badge. So technically I never turned it in. But as far as the state's concerned, I'm retired. And I still think of it as we, and I still get angry when we didn't do something right at work. And I think, oh, you kids, why did they ever promote you guys? And you can't carry my gym bag.
I
So, with that, what divisions did you command as captain then?
Almost all of them, because I was there. I was a captain 20 years, just about. I had make a list the other day, and I thought, what am I leaving out, and what order? But I started out. I was an acting captain in domestic violence and sexual assault, which is one unit. Took up. Oh, I get off on a tangent there. I think I went from there to internal affairs, which I did for about 3 years, which is, I think, the longest. But I had a really good rapport with Chief Kurlikowski, and we could have, oh, I like these meetings. I had a lot of FaceTime with the boss. So we'd go into his office and sit down. He'd put his feet up on his furniture that he bought. And the first thing out of his mouth, I think, was the F bomb. And I like, oh, but it told me that he's relaxed. I can say anything I want in here and it won't leave this room. And so I really enjoyed that. And so that, I would have a weekly meeting with him and was constantly briefing city attorneys, city council and whatnot. That was really fun. Fun, but pressure. I gained 40 pounds. Eating M&M's peanuts. That's my stress thing. And yeah, long hours. From there, I swapped with the guy in homicide. That captain came down. I went up there, and that was really good. But the problem was both my lieutenants were incredibly sharp, very good at managing their shops. So it made my job really easy. And that's probably where I started doing more research on my books because I had time on my hands. But
Mhm.
I remember going for an interview for a chief's position and telling the chief, hey, good news is I've got really good lieutenants work for me, and they both became captains. Bad news is I've got really good people working for me, and I'm looking for more of a challenge. So somewhere in there, something happened in the city, and they needed an ethics commander, and I became the first ethics commander. Uh, I went to training, and I was in charge of advanced training for a while. Yeah, I was in my head, all of a sudden it kind of clicked where that was at, but I enjoyed that too, but it was kind of off campus and away from the mainstream, but it was still good. And the night commanders, what I did wait a minute. I did night commander for about 5 years, and then they made me captain of Metropolitan and Homeland Security. Now, Homeland Security, this part is kind of on a shelf. I'm just kind of looking at to see if I stay up to date on things. But the Metropolitan, they call it the animal unit, had SWAT, their animals, Horse Patrol, Canine, and and I was in charge of like all of the toys that the department have that's out in a big warehouse that we can use for any kind of disturbance. And I kind of, and we did the planning. I switched from that to planning for like a presidential visit or large disturbances and whatnot. But mostly it was like for dignitary visits, like when the premier of China came over, my people were working their buns off, and we had Secret Service in there and FBI, and we're coordinating all that. And then of course the presidents come through, and that was kind of good. But another captain who was a general in the Army Reserve says, well, I've been a precinct commander. I want Neil's job. And because he's been a precinct commander, he'll get rewarded with that. So I saw that coming, and I said to the chief, how about that night command? I like having 4 10s, and I could do the other part of the week. And she said, deal. So I finished up my career as a night commander, and those were good hours. And it's really nice to be the boss when you go to something. When you get there, they should be telling you how they're doing stuff, and then my job is to tell the chief or the mayor or maybe a deputy chief sometimes on what we're doing and how we're taking care of this problem. But I quite like that. You could call it a fixer, but I was the fixer in a good way.
So in 50 years on the Seattle Police Department, you've done just about everything, it sounds like.
Well, I thought so, and then I wasn't a precinct commander, but I got a premium pay for being the night commander, but it was the precinct commander. I was like, well, that would have been really cool, but it's a massive headache. And then I told Tom when I retired that, I had a skin condition. I'm having to deal with it again coming up here soon. And I was going to be off for a little bit. And so they had me turn in my car, and they gave my office to somebody else, and they were treating me as retired. And I haven't said I'm retired yet, but they were definitely, and they took my position and brought in somebody else and promoted him to assistant chief. So I thought, well, wait a minute, how is that fair? Somebody half my age is now an assistant chief doing what I did. What? Well, anyway, but I'm not bitter because I'm paid well in retirement.
Something you said I want to touch on. You mentioned your dreams right after you left the department, and you were there for a whole lot longer than I was a cop, a law enforcement officer with the LA Sheriff's Department. But I remember having nightmares for a year or two, at least a year or two after I left. And I'm not a nightmare person. I can probably count the number of nightmares I've had in my life on one hand. But I had a recurring nightmare that was just, I never could figure out the meaning of it. But I I would be in a shootout with somebody. I'd stop a car or whatever, and I'd be in a shootout and we'd be firing at each other. And every time I shot my gun, the bullet would come out the end and just go like that and plop down.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
would sometimes I'd be throwing my, going like that to make the bullet
John
go
Wayne.
harder. Yeah. And that was a recurring nightmare. I had that
Yeah.
several times for a few years after I left the department.
Well,
I
that
don't know where it came from, but
not that I'm going to shrink your head right now, but that sounds like PTSD, which I
yeah, could
wanted
be.
to talk about a little bit. And I had to give a, I was deposed to give a briefing on a case I was going to testify into. And it was a former city attorney who had looked at all my stuff and said, "Oh, it says here in your resume you were involved in 2 shootings." Yeah. "Well, isn't it true you were involved in 3? Oh, wait a minute. So, well, yeah, the Great Escape, where Officer Alexander was shot and wounded. And oh my God. I guess that was an active shooting scene, and I was there, but I didn't shoot anybody. I arrested the suspect."
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I'm not further comment on that, but I arrested the suspect. But I was apparently quite traumatized, and we didn't know what PTSD was, but I started having not just night sweats, but night terror, where I'd wake up in my bed, at night, disorganized, and other symptoms that went with that. But I had no idea what was driving that, but it all started with that shooting. And oh, so Tom knows I'm editing an autobiography for another police captain. He just talked about his PTSD, and that's what brought it back. Is like,
His
oh,
autobiography is that thick.
oh yeah, yeah. And so, Tom, I'm about halfway through it, but it's starting to speed up a little bit because there's a lot. I don't care about that. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
But when he talked about the PTSD, I go, oh, we have a lot of similarities here. Let's see what this is about.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something. You've got impeccable credentials. You've had an incredible career, 50 years on the Seattle Police Department. When I tell my family and my friends about what you're doing and about the first book you wrote, Crazy Love, and that you're working on a sequel to that, the first thing they say to me is, well, if he was around for 50 years and he was around back there in 1994, why didn't he do something?
Yeah.
What was going on with him when all this was happening?
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Well, that's one of those things when you're in it, you don't think about it. It's like, well, of course people know what I was doing, but no, they don't. They don't know how probable cause works, which we were talking about. But at the time Kurt died, I wasn't a fan. He was younger group. I was a Beatles fan. And then I liked the hard rock of Led Zeppelin and whatnot, which is what I'd be listening to. So I wasn't a fan. I was in the South Precinct as a new lieutenant and minding my own business out there. So I knew nothing about it. And then about a year later, I'm transferred up to the East Precinct. No, wait a minute. No, not a year after he died, but within the year of my being a lieutenant, I was transferred up east. And I think I was there like a week or two when Kristen Paff died of an overdose. And it was one of the same officers, Joe Fuel, came in to brief the chief that, hey, we just found out that this is a member of Courtney's band. And the captain and I are looking at each other. It's like, you don't have to say it. I'm going to go up there, take a look around, make sure we got everything done. And so that was my first introduction to the Cobains. And then after that, Courtney would call the precinct. Captain didn't want to talk to her. So, Neil, you take it. And she would say, I want that diary. Courtney, I can't give you the diary. Oh, well, yeah, but we might have some songs in there that we wrote. No, and which is what I wrote in the book, my fictional book.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not going to give it to you, but it did inspire me to go back and get it out of evidence and just scan it quickly to see if I saw any ideations of suicide or something she was afraid of or whatever. And I didn't see anything, so I put it back in evidence. And I've been contacted from an attorney from in London, I think, that was trying to find it for the family. But sometimes stuff goes into evidence, and if nobody claimed it or they didn't see the value of it, another detective handle, like one of the ones you've dealt with, Tom, might
Yeah.
have said, "Oh, who needs that? Let's just send it for destruction."
Does his last name start with a C?
Yeah, he probably would have got it and said, "Oh, she's dead, and it's just a pile of junk. Let's destroy it." Well, I looked at it, it was her property, and the family might want it, and maybe they could read her handwriting. I couldn't. Anyways, too bad. So that was my first introduction to it. And then, well, 2005, I did the audit when the chief said, here, I want you to work on a project, pick a case and go audit it. I think it was a test to see what I could do. And I picked the Cobain case because I had heard the shotgun might not be in evidence. It might have disappeared. Now, okay, I'm kind of getting off the question you asked, so remind me to come back.
No, that's good. I want to hear about that.
Ballistics on a shotgun just aren't there. They can look at the shell, see if the primer strike was from this gun, but you can't put the pellets back in and say, oh, there's rifling. There's no rifling on the pellets.
Yeah.
So why did it go out to evidence? Well, I didn't check because I didn't think it might have been a problem, but either the sergeant or a detective signed it out. I'm guessing it was probably the sergeant who's now passed away. And he was about to get fired within the year of Cobain's death. And I think he decided he better put everything back in order. My guess, I don't have that as proof. And so when I got there, the shotgun is in evidence. I handled it. It's got the right serial number and whatnot. But now back to what I was in the time of Cobain's death was a lieutenant in another precinct. So we talked about chain of command, and I can't go and I'm taking the word of my fellow officers that everything was kosher, and everybody that was there, I genuinely trust.
Sure.
But again, probable cause, not the same as proof. And so I'm working with probable cause mindset that, yeah, it's all good. They had capable people there. And in my business, you do not walk into somebody else's shop and say, I think you need to do a better job on that. It's just not done, because they'll usually start out with a strong invective and tell you, you're not my boss. You go talk to my lieutenant or my captain or the chief, but I'm not taking orders from you. And I don't know who the hell you think you are. Don't come in here telling me how to do my job. And all of us are really proud of what we can do. So I totally get that, and I'm respectful of that. But so then years later, I did go back and visit Detective C when I was night commander.
We'll just call him Cameron for short, okay?
Oh, no, that's the sergeant. I was thinking you're thinking of the cold case detective.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
The
But Cameron was gone, but I went back and saw the detective who was doing cold cases. And so this is about 26 years.
Szynski, I think is his name, right?
The other C.
Come on. I like him, but I went in and I tried to sell him on what I had seen on a film review, which had inspired me so much that I took notes and watched it again, like I was in school. It's like, oh, this is wrong. This is wrong. Oh, I got to look this up, this up, this up. And my publisher wanted me to write about it. I thought, I'm not going to do it. Until I read this and I thought, oh, there's some problems here. I'm going to look into this. But so I went to a certain detective. And so,
what do you think? To somebody whose name was not Szynski, right?
Yeah, right. So he politely blew me off. At some point, I had been the homicide commander, but at that time there was nothing going on in the case. But now I went back in, and knowing I'm not his boss, and said, what do you think about this? And he goes, this is suicide. And yeah, I think he said you were full of BS, and there was nothing to be found there, and he wasn't going to reopen it. And so somebody said, well, how are these cases worked? The cold cases. It's up to him, the cold case guy. He may get a hit on DNA is often, the savior, and he'll run with that and open a case and do some checking with, or do a new DNA run on it, and he'll get a hit that way. But he's the one who has to decide it has solvability factors.
Yeah.
If there aren't any, he's not going to pursue it. I walked in there and he said, you got anything new I haven't read? I don't see any new solvability factors. So
Yeah.
we're not just working on hunches here, boss.
Well, while we're talking about that detective with the beginning, his last name was C, ending with Y. I got down on him quite a bit, and reading just the first page of my website, cobaincase.com, I detailed a lot of the things that he said and that he wrote, and he really buried the Seattle Police Department as far as what he said. I mean, I don't think he was even conscious of the things that he was saying that contradicted every piece of logic that had to do with a so-called suicide. I also, I know you knew a lot of these people well as
Yeah.
friends and everything, and I didn't. All I could do is look at their work and criticize them and all that. I've always felt that if Szynski was my next door neighbor, we'd probably be good friends. He seemed like a nice guy.
Very, very likable. Yeah.
And I've made mistakes when I was a cop and when I was a private investigator. We all make mistakes. So, but that one thing I home in on, and when a cop makes a mistake, and especially when I'm involved in this whole thing, I'm gonna nail them, and
Yeah.
I mean, that was part of your job as the captain of internal affairs too,
Sure.
So anyhow, yeah, Szynski did a unbelievably terrible job in his review of that case, and his interview that he did publicly on television. If you watch and listen to everything that he said, it's like, there is no way, based on what he said alone, there's no way Kurt Cobain could have committed suicide.
Mhm.
I don't
Can
know
we
if
talk
you've
about,
actually seen that or not, but
no, can we talk about the note?
yeah,
Because I'm thinking he probably bought in, like the medical examiner and everybody else, to the suicide note. And
right.
you and I, without me knowing what you said, came up with the same conclusion, that this was, I'm tired of the band. I'm not Freddie Mercury. I'm looking forward to retirement. Okay. And I said, well, what's
Yeah.
that got to do with suicide? And then it's at the very end. I still don't see a goodbye, cruel world. I hate you. I hate myself. I hate my life. I never saw that.
Yeah.
So I told Tom that when I was going back to school to polish up my writing, one of the classes I took was on narrative form. And there were several things, particularly the Lebavian analysis, and I'm not going to bore you or your listeners with what that is. But the one element at the very end is the story has to make sense to people. So that's like the key thing that I might come back to. You don't want to tell a story and what was the point of that? Why'd you waste my time?
Yeah.
But besides that, I sharpened my skills on what elements there are in story writing. And okay, so I'm looking at one of the world's best, I just did something on my computer, songwriters. Let me get rid of that. And I even if he was high when he was writing this, and he might have been when he did it in parts, I think it was like a two-part thing. I think he wrote the top. It was going to be,
do too.
I'm retiring from music. Tough luck, you guys. Find a new album. I never did see him saying that. And then that part about Courtney's the best or whatever, I said, she wrote this. This is not what a dude would write. This is what she wrote. because she has to be the center of attention. You know, she's very narcissistic. And so, same with that other note that was you found on the stairs. It had in
Right.
you're
From
being
Callie.
mean. You're being mean to uh,
So you're,
Courtney, and
yeah.
that's just unfair to Courtney, and blah blah blah. No dude writes that. This
Right.
is entirely her doing, and that last little bit. Goodbye to Courtney, but yeah, all right.
She
I
told him
think
what to
my
write.
thought is he was going to
basically.
Yeah.
leave with somebody else, you know. And
Yeah.
in my head, in my book, I talk about. I think he had a thing with Kristen Path, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons he came up with her. But it could have been different than that. But anyway, so that's my narrative. I'm going with there was kind of a romance because he came right back up here, and anyway, so the reading, I think I had an advantage when I saw the note, that I had some training in understanding why we say what we say, including we all often lie at the end of our stories to make it make sense, even
Right.
though we don't realize we do it, we have internalized it. And so back to the note, I just didn't buy the note. I thought that was it's a two-parter, and it wasn't a suicide note, but it's what a lot of the people involved here assumed was a suicide note because they didn't apply the Lebovian analysis to
They
it.
didn't only assume it; they just stated.
They went with
plain
it,
out,
yeah.
It is a suicide note, and even
Well,
in
it's a place where
coroner's
one
report-
would be, you know, with stabbed in the tray and all that. And it's
Yeah.
like,
So
yeah,
dramatic.
that was a dramatic statement. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not buying it. And I've had more training on this than any of you guys in reading notes.
I
Yeah.
want to
Actually,
ask you something
yes.
about that. The CAPT written on the note, that was quite significant for you, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. That was to me, it told me that was Captain. And that she might have wrote that, but she wanted to know who she was talking to. So she probably talked to Captain Farrar. In my book, I call him Farmer.
Yeah.
But he was a good no-nonsense guy. I think he ordered the detectives out, but they didn't do what he wanted to do. They didn't bag the hands. They didn't collect evidence. They just, oh, it's a suicide. Don't do anything. Patrol officers don't know about bagging hands and whatnot. And
Right.
I think Farrar was hoping they would do a better job. But you see the picture, and they're just kind of sitting back like, anybody bring coffee? Let's get a Starbucks coffee container here for us. And yeah,
And look at me. I'm standing in the greenhouse where Kurt Cobain was killed. You know.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And oh well, something else we talked about was I'm writing the sequel, and in my head I'm picking up on the fact that the police officers don't know how to bag hands. Detectives should have done that. And then it would go up to the medical examiner to scrape the nails. Maybe he was in a struggle. Maybe we'd like to know whose DNA was under the fingernails. But you can't do that if they haven't been bagged. So that is what I'm seizing on, and something else that might come back to me. But I was not happy with the investigation, and they didn't put anything into it, and it showed.
You know. There's more that we'll get to in the end about that. I want to ask you a little bit more about that and what you
So
would
do I,
think
yeah.
happened. I want to just come right out and ask you, Captain Lowe, do you believe Kurt Cobain committed suicide?